Welcome to Development Desk, a space where parenting meets psychology, advocacy meets action, and insight replaces the noise. I'm Anna, a school psychologist and mom, sharing what I've learned from years inside the system and alongside families. Together, we'll unpack the why behind the behavior, decode the school processes, and build something strong, one conversation at a time. From insight to action, from chaos to clarity, this is Development Desk. The information shared on Development Desk is for educational and informational purposes only. While I am a licensed school psychologist, this podcast does not constitute psychological services, legal advice, or therapeutic relationship. The views expressed are my own and do not reflect the policies or positions of any school district or employer. This content is not a substitute for professional consultation with a qualified provider in your state. Always seek appropriate support when making decisions related to your child's education, health, or legal rights. To have my sweet friend Claudia Flores to join us. So Claudia is a speech pathologist in the field for over 13 years, right?
Yes.
So primarily you've been working in the medical field with adults and psychiatric hospitals, and then also home health. You've done 4 years in the schools as well.
Right. Yes. And it was part-time, but I still got a lot of good experience there as a bilingual SLP. So
Yes, and it was an ISD in San Antonio, a
right.
very affluent ISD.
Right. Yes.
Yes, I wanted to bring Claudia onto the podcast because communication is extremely critical when it comes to parents understanding, and even teachers understanding how communication plays a role in behavior and how that's really big for kids on the spectrum, but even not even on the spectrum, right? There's so many other communication deficits or concerns that parents might have, or even school personnel. So many kids in the schools have speech surfaces of some type, like the littles. And so I wanted to have you on here to talk about your passions and insights.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. It's a big piece. Communication is how we express ourselves. There's a lot of behaviors that come out when you're not able to communicate like what you're thinking, that frustration behind when you're not able to just express yourself. Like if you're angry, you're kind of upset about something and you just withdraw or you act out instead.
Absolutely. So tell us your journey on becoming a speech pathologist and why you were even interested in the field.
I did want to do something like in the therapy field and kind of like really fell in love with the speech therapy aspect of it and really just continued pursuing that. And then I ended up in a really good medical placement for my master's externship. And that's where I really found like my niche. I was really happy with working in that hospital medical setting with adults mostly.
This was on our agenda, but just right now as you were talking, it made me think about parents' understanding of the medical field versus school and the educational need for services versus the medical realm of services. And so many times parents will come in and say, but my kid qualifies for speech, in the private sector with a private speech pathologist. I want speech in the schools. And sometimes they don't qualify for speech services in the school. Can you break that down for parents to be able to understand why their child might not qualify in the school for speech?
Yeah, it's very different. The school said speech services is mostly academic based, right? If a student or child is struggling with communicating with their peers because they have an articulation problem, then that's something that needs to be addressed in the schools. But if they are getting along with their friends, but maybe they're still like having some trouble like with one sound or something, and it's not affecting communication with their peers, they're still able to communicate with their teachers and their friends and have good relationships with them, when they're not getting bullied or anything like that, wouldn't suffice the need for speech therapy in a school setting. But they could still do some speech therapy like in an outpatient setting, and that would be okay, right? Because that's separate. But is it a school need? Is there like a educational or like social impact on the student because of that deficit or disability? Not really. So then that's when we say, you know what, it's not really appropriate. They don't really require the need for the speech therapy. And you have to think about it because a lot of the kids that are being taken out of speech therapy sometimes impacts like their actual academic learning because you're taking them out of core classes, right? And all the kids are learning like, oh my gosh, at rapid speed, right? In their classes, and even just all the social interactions that they're getting with their friends. But you're pulling the students out for those few minutes, and sometimes it's not worth it. The time that they spent with their friends and in that classroom is sometimes a little bit more valuable.
Right.
If it's not if it's not really impacting them, let's say just it's not needed, right?
It's not worth taking them out.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they're so important, everything that they're learning in their classes, and then you don't want to get them behind either. So
Right. When you say that, I think of a lot of the students in middle school or even high school on the spectrum, and the speech pathologist is trying to dismiss them from services, from educational school services. And the parents are like, no, they still need it. I think that plays into like what you're saying, right? If they're doing just fine and like their speech is not impacting their academic performance or their social interaction, then it's best for the parent to think about, okay, my child is actually gaining more by staying in the classroom instead of being pulled out for speech therapy.
yes, and in the middle schools, I don't know if it varies from district to district, but some of them do not allow them to be pulled out of like even elective classes like art or like physical education, right? So then you're really just pulling out during like their lunchtime, which is
Oh,
yeah, and it's only a few minutes out of their lunch that they have to like eat really quick and then be able to go to therapy. But by the time you're really doing that therapy, they're just thinking about wanting to go with their friends, and they're not really 100% present with you.
engaging.
Yeah, and sometimes there's a little bit of like resentment, but you have those kids too that are really motivated and they really want to work on their speech, and those are good candidates. Okay, this is something that's really important to you and you want to work on it. Let's do it. Let's do some therapy during your lunch, and can you give you some exercises for you to go home and practice on and on your own, and you have some of those kids that are stellar clients. And
Right. Yeah. So it just all depends. It's very individualized and it depends.
right, yes.
That leads me to the next point that I wanted us to discuss is bridging those gaps between the parents and teachers. Can you kind of expound on that?
Yeah, in a hospital setting, you see them every day mostly, and these are the things you need to work on throughout the day. But with kids, you kind of never see the parents, and the kids are not very self-sufficient. They're not as independent. Take the initiative to, oh, let me practice my speech stuff.
Yeah.
So they have to have some kind of accountability system. That's where you really need the parents and the therapists and the teachers even sometimes. I know it's a lot for the teachers because they do so much, and I totally realize that. But it's really important just for everybody to be in the same loop and understand. And a lot of the times on the beginning of the year, you're just introduce yourself typically to the parents, right? And say, I'm going to be your child's new speech therapist for the year. Let me know if you have any questions. And I think I only got a few responses back. And I know parents are very busy, but this is where it really makes a big difference.
That's saying a lot coming from an affluent district. Imagine the parents when you're in a community that's lower SES where the parents are really working ridiculous hours.
Yeah.
I can imagine it's hard to collaborate with the school staff.
I know. And sometimes it's really helpful just to keep that line of communication open and have that accountability, like I was saying, so that you can all work together and work toward your goals or whatever the child's working on.
So it sounds like you're saying it's not just the one-on-one therapy with the student that's critical. It's also about helping the student to generalize what they're learning in therapy in the classroom and at home as well, which is why we need to really be all working together to support that child.
Right. That was a wake-up call for me from coming from a very technical, like therapy setting, working on things like drilling and stuff. And then that was an everyday thing. But then you go to the school setting where you're only seeing kids once or twice, maybe 3 times a week for like a few minutes, right? And then okay, bye. And then, and then you don't know what they're doing the rest of the time. But by the time they come back to you, let's say it's 1 time a week, you don't really get that carryover really well. They're not practicing their strategies. So then it takes a really long time to master goals because you're not getting that frequency that they need to really understand and learn what they need to do.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Yeah. So sometimes I've seen in students' IEPs where the speech pathologist would consult with the teacher. Some of the minutes are consultation,
where I think that's when the speech pathologist is asking the teacher, are you doing this with them? Are you doing that with them in the classroom? Like you said, teachers, they do have a lot on their plate and that's hard, but then it's also hard for a child to progress if everyone's not helping the child to generalize those things. Those
Right.
skills. Yeah.
Like giving them some of the responsibility to the child.
Yeah, I know. It is a child. So yeah. I know with my own experience with Sophia, my daughter,
Aw.
and her R's, when we're with you, sometimes you'll like correct her, which I'm okay with. I'm totally okay with. I love it. And I know that she could probably be better with her R's at this time, but then she's also my baby and my last baby. And so I'm like, it's just so cute.
I know.
So I get that. I think parents and teachers can work on correcting. This kind of goes into our next point that I wanted to discuss is what is recasting or modeling language in everyday environments? What does that look like?
So modeling is a technique that all SLPs use when they're helping the students with articulation or language or even social situations. How would you address this, right? And you model like what that would look like. And so if you're a therapist for so long, you tend to just, and even your conversations and everything that you do, you tend to start doing your speech strategies. You just start over articulating or being very loud or sometimes you're with other kids and then you notice that they're saying things a little bit not complete sentences or something. And it's almost innate for a speech therapist just because you've been doing it for so long, all day, every day. And so you tend to start using those strategies even on like your husband sometimes, or your kids, obviously, but other kids too. And it's just, you feel like you just have to do that because you know about it and you should help.
You feel like you're doing your due diligence and like supporting that.
And that's when I think if I know what I'm supposed to do or what a child may need but I won't take Sophia's R away from you. So.
No, that's okay. Now at 50%, she's starting to pronounce certain things correctly. I have been working on correcting them. She's getting better at it. So, why is early intervention and the importance of it when it comes to behavior, when it comes to students on the spectrum or with OTPT? But I wanted you to talk about why that is so important when it comes to speech, the early intervention part.
Sometimes children are referred when they're really little, maybe 3, 5 years, that age, when they're in preschool, heading to kinder or in kindergarten. And a lot of the times people are on the fence. Should I qualify this child for speech services? And for me, I would recommend yes, because you don't want more time to pass and then your child is still in that same situation, but you could have had all this time before to really work on problem solving or navigating social situations and really being able to correct some of those language deficits that some children may have at an early stage where therapy is really fun. Then they're heading into elementary or middle school. And by that time, it's like you're taking up time from their academics. And
when it could have been worked on when they were really little.
When they were really little, learning on fun alphabet stuff, the kids catch up on that stuff. And you're not taking up too much time because they're mostly playing for learning. And so therapy at that time is just, it's more fun. It's more engaging. The kids don't even know that they're in therapy. They're like, I'm going to go play. But little do they know that they're doing drills and like working on their language skills that they need to work on. And then I would just say that sets them up for the school years, right? Once they hit first, maybe like second grade, you really start doing the hardcore academics. And then third grade is like, you're done. Like,
you hit the ground running.
Yes, exactly. And that's when STAR starts. It's really content based, like heavy content that they're learning. And so really, I feel early intervention is best because that way you can set up your kid for the long runs, trying to minimize the effect of needing therapy later on.
So if there is a speech concern, is it typically just articulation during those early years, or is there anything else that a parent should be looking out for communication?
That goes back to the behavior component, right? So your child acting out a little bit and not being able to express themselves. Well, maybe they don't have the language to do that. And so behaviors can be another red flag. I would say, are they isolated? Are they socializing with their peers? That's another sign that it would warrant a speech evaluation. And we learn from each other. If you're not engaging with your peers, your learning is probably going to be impacted by that too. So I would say their behaviors is a really big red flag. And that's why they have you answer all those questions at the doctor's office.
Right.
Like, oh my God, there's so many questions. But those prompts the doctors like, hey, maybe we need a speech referral or something like that.
Yeah, those milestone questionnaires. So when a child is 3, they can go to their local campus, their local school district, and request an evaluation, and the district will do a speech evaluation with a parent having some concerns. But if they wanted to not go through the school for whatever reason, would they just need to talk to their pediatrician about their concerns and then a referral sent? How does that work on that end of it?
Right. You would just go with the pediatrician and have them submit a referral if there is a need. And they may do their own screeners too. I'm not sure what that looks like, but usually if the parent has a concern, I think doctors are more than happy to be like, yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Here's the order and go with a speech therapy clinic or something.
And if insurance is not covering it or an expense is a concern, then that's why I also advocate for parents to go to a school district, because your tax dollars are already paying for it.
Yeah.
So go utilize that free service through the school district if there is a speech concern.
Yeah, and that's why I was also going to mention like how important it was to like really work with the teachers or with the therapist. Let's say you don't have access to insurance, but you do have access to the schools, right? And this is where parents really could take advantage of that opportunity and talk to the therapist and ask them, what are you guys working on? What can I do at home? Take advantage of the therapist's knowledge and your students' maybe disability. What does it look like? What are things that you need to do? If parents could do a little bit more research, anything, like really anything would help. YouTube videos, Instagram. There's so much information out there now that it's just readily available.
That's so true. There's a lot of YouTube videos.
Yeah.
When Sophia was going through her school evaluation, she didn't qualify, but they had given me like a whole list of recommendations for parents to do. Are there any specific tools that parents can look for at home that you maybe recommend?
There's a lot of stuff on YouTube. I know there's a Peachy Speechy. I remember
I've
some
heard
of her
that, yeah.
videos. She's great. I sometimes would use some of her videos too so that I could show the kids in speech and they have visuals, and there's some resources out there that like you can also buy. I can't remember the names of them, but it shows other kids going through situations where they can learn what's the proper way to handle this situation.
Oh, okay. Like a social story?
Yeah, something like that. But it's a video so they can relate to it because they're kids their age. But yeah, there's so much out there. And I guarantee you, if you ask your speech therapist, they will give you the information that you need.
And that can be very specific to your child.
Speech therapists cover voice, fluency, they cover articulation.
That's what we can talk about. So when a child qualifies in the schools, there's different areas within speech that they're qualifying in. What are those different areas?
So the fluency is one of them.
In layman's term, can you explain what?
Right.
Fluency
Sorry.
is?
So stuttering is one of the qualifications, which we refer to as fluency.
Oh, okay.
And then there's articulation, your speech sounds that you may not be able to get the right sound out. It's really just being able to pronounce the words the right way. And there's language too. Within language, you have expressive, where you're like being able to produce the right words that you need to communicate. Or there's also receptive. So that's like being able to understand the information that you're hearing, or, even from like a story or your teacher's talking, giving you directives, and you're not able to follow the directions because you can't like retain them. There's also like pragmatic language, right? Which is the social aspect of communication. So that's being able to carry on a conversation, maintain the conversation, just like, or even initiating, turn taking. It could be like navigating like problems with like social situations, and those are some of the areas. There's voice too, but I can't remember if the voice is something that they would qualify for. I would think so. I think it would be part of like articulation, right? But there has to be like a medical need, like, or like a ENT needs to kind of probably check that out before
you qualify. I've never seen a student qualify for voice.
Yeah, I think it would, because they don't have like a voice qualification, but I think it would, something like that would fall under like articulation or something like that.
And so when we're evaluating for autism, almost always we'll work with a speech pathologist. Sometimes we'll also have OT, maybe PT. And so the reason why the 2 of the 3 criteria for autism have to do with speech, like nonverbal communication and verbal communication. And typically our students with autism will show a deficit in the pragmatic language, right? And if I'm evaluating a student in middle school, they had not been identified. Whatever the reason is, now they're being identified. Is there ever a time where you are not providing, like they do have a deficit in pragmatic, but you might not be providing special education, speech pathology therapy?
Yeah, I would think we saw quite a few of those situations that we were in where it's like these students had like a medical or like school diagnosis of autism, right? And sometimes they were referred for like a speech evaluation. And we would assess them and we would see expressive receptive language looks really good, but there's a little bit of difficulties with the pragmatic language. But unless it was a significant amount, like where it really was impacting their social situations with their peers, then that would warrant the need for some speech services. Okay, well, maybe you don't have any tools to be able to address or navigate these situations. And you're maybe acting out and you're being a little bit aggressive or being like withdrawn or something like that. Then I think that would warrant some speech services.
Okay.
But with the diagnosis like autism, I think it's understood that there's still some kind of pragmatic language deficits at times. And they may not be like 100%, but that's okay. And that's something that, you know, if it's not impacting their social situation or their academics, because some kids are very smart. They don't need any help with that. Yeah, it just depends on the student and what they are needing.
Okay. I mean, it goes back to, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the eligibility is. If there's not a need for those services, then they can have the deficit, but still not need the speech therapy. Okay. Can you give an example of a student with that has a communication deficit in like I want parents to really understand like the expressive and the receptive piece of it. What exactly does that look like? What have you seen that might stick out, or like something that you've seen for a deficit in expressive and then a deficit in receptive? And sometimes they have both.
Yeah.
Let's do elementary.
Elementary. Okay.
Yes, please.
So typically when we do a language evaluation, we do all those 3 areas. So it's like expressive, receptive, and then the pragmatic language piece of it. And so sometimes we'll do a little bit of informal too. We're kind of like checking them out and just in a conversation to see how well they're able to carry themselves and talk, express themselves. And are they able to like follow the directions like in a natural setting? But then we do a structured or standardized test, right? To see how well they do compared to like other children their age. And that gives us like that objective data that we need. But sometimes like you would see kids in elementary school that probably have trouble with like retaining information from like a sentence, like, okay, repeat the sentence that I just said. And sometimes they're not able to, you know, recall that information like right after. And so that would probably be something that would be like a receptive language thing. Like you're not really understanding or retaining. Maybe they're distracted. We don't know, but so that would be an example, I think, is like having trouble like following directions or being able to like answer questions from information that is given to them. And then expressive, sometimes like, you know, maybe you don't have like a lot of good grammar or your sentences kind of fall short. Like you're not really completing sentences with like the grammar structure is not there, something like that. And even in conversation, because sometimes like if it's a academic thing, then that's a little bit, well, yeah, we could help with that, but it's more, we really care about like the verbal aspect of it. Sometimes students don't have like the vocabulary, and that's a lot of the times what it was. Like, are they using like descriptor words to be able to communicate and describe things? Or are they just kind of using like very flat, like concrete, like nouns to just like, oh, blue ball, or like instead of like the blue bouncy colorful ball, or I don't know, just like different light blue, or, you know, adding those descriptive words.
So it might be like more of a deficit in verbal comprehension rather than like an expressive deficit.
Well, it would fall under expressive.
Okay.
language, but we could specify like the areas that may be affected.
The verbal comprehension. So with some cognitive areas, so like in our evaluations, typically, depending on the referral, but typically we'll evaluate over 7 cognitive areas, right? And so the 7 different areas, for some of them, they're constant. Like they're never going to change. Some of them, some of the areas you can grow in, like verbal comprehension. The more exposed you are to language, maybe having speech therapy, you can grow in that area. Like your cognitive abilities can grow. There are some theories out there also, though, that at a certain age or like brain development, that's it. Like you have like reached, this is your IQ, like this is constant. It's not going to change by a certain age. Like you kind of have that gap. Is that the case for speech? I've heard the speech pathologists I've worked with before, they've said certain things like that in ARD meetings and IEP meetings where they tell the parent, like, this is in a nice way, like this is the best it's going to get because of their age at this point. And that's kind of like why it was so critical for them to have early intervention, because now they're at this age, parents still want them to have speech therapy for school, you know, as a senior, and speech pathologist is trying to cut them off at 8th grade. So is that really a thing? Have you
I think,
seen that?
I mean, there's so much like research out there about like the neuroplasticity and how your brain is ever developing and growing and making connections and stuff. Unless you have like a condition where it's like not doing that. But I would say for the most part, you're constantly learning, like every day. Even right now, we're like still learning, right? And as long as you are able to like do the activities or maybe habits or something that you need to do to be able to like continue growing. But sometimes, like, you know, you've been with the therapist for so long and you already kind of have learned the all they need to give you. And so sometimes it's time to move on, and there's nothing else I can like give you because I only see you maybe once a week. That's not enough time to really like make a change. Like it's at that point, it's like you really need to do some of the habits and work on your own, or maybe do some more intensive therapy so that you could really try to like keep working on those things.
Which would be in the medical field.
I think would be like an outpatient setting, because the schools, like, you don't want to take away from the academics too.
If that's the case, like a parent is getting, like their child is getting older and the speech pathologist at the IEP is saying, we've kind of reached our limit of, they know what needs to be done, but it's not being generalized. They're not necessarily working on it the way, or like it's not as rigorous or intense as they need it to be, then a parent really needs to work on like seeking outpatient
Yeah,
services.
I think that would be a good idea, and just trying something, trying anything, right, to help your child get what they need to so that they can succeed and move on. But there is a lot of times when you're working with a student and you've seen them for so long, and it's like maybe you've seen them all 5 years of their elementary school time, and it's like, okay, I think we've like met our max, like our potential here, because there's really nothing more that I can teach you. I really has to maybe sometimes a change of a therapist is really important, because it's a fresh new, like maybe they might be doing some of the same thing. Even just having that new relationship with somebody that you like, oh, you know, that's kind of like exciting. And, you know, let me try again and I'll work on something.
Right.
Sometimes that helps too. But yeah, sometimes there's kind of like that point where they're just, or is the student even invested? Like, do they want to work on their speech, or are they kind of just like,
right. You need
done.
you need a buy-in.
Right. Yeah.
It sounds very similar to like psychological therapy and counseling. It sounds very similar, because even as an adult, if you go to the therapist, sometimes it's you reach your limit with a certain therapist and it's time to try someone else or do something, you know, you've outgrown them or whatnot. And I think the same is like in the schools when parents want their kids to do counseling, but there's no buy-in from them. And so it's not super helpful. So sometimes we'll recommend like psychological services where we're consulting with staff and parents sometimes, you know, and working with the student's behavior. But
Right.
yeah, so it sounds very similar to that.
Yeah, I think it's like any relationship, right? It's like, okay, we're done. Or we've
Except-
kind of like done everything that we can or said
Yeah.
everything we could and it's been great, but we kind of need a new start or something. But no, I feel like it really is true. And but you have some kids too that are really motivated and they will do like the work. That's so nice to see when students really take the initiative and they're just, like really taking in what you learn. But some kids don't have those tools. So it's hard for them to even be able to do those things.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Was there any other points that you wanted to talk about or share?
I think I just kind of wanted to mention being able to support like the teachers and the therapists, however you can, kind of like going back to that, like anything that a parent or a parent can do to help support their therapist or their teachers, mostly because the child is mostly with the teachers like all day, right? And like the whole happy wife, happy life kind of thing. It's happy teacher, maybe like happy child or like learner, right? It's like you really need to it's like all full circle, really. So if you have a teacher that's like having to deal with maybe a student that's like being like misbehaving or acting out because they don't have the tools that they need, it's really like everybody needs to work together to help support the teacher. And that includes the parents and the therapists and everybody it takes to help situations like that, because it affects the whole classroom, right? And your kids are growing up with those same other kids in the classroom. So it's really just like being supportive of that whole unit, as a whole.
Yeah.
And that will in turn help your student too.
That's a really great point. Yeah. I think sometimes parents will like send their kids to school like, well, this is your problem. Like this is your thing. Like you need to work on it. And instead of really supporting the teacher in that way.
Yeah. And that's why I say, like, I feel like teachers are very busy, right? But if you could just take that one like extra moment to be able to, get that communication going or like see however somebody could be of help, then that goes a long way, I think. Yeah. And then I think like just some tips that I was going to mention too for parents is like, oh my gosh, the power of reading. And I was seeing earlier, like all the books that you have, and I'm like, that's so good. A lot of the times you think like, oh, that they'll learn how to read at school. Really, like the kids learn a lot, like so much, or they have the potential to learn a lot at home.
Yeah.
And it's just constantly reading to your child so that they're receiving like all of that language and maybe like that information about new worlds out there or new concepts or something. And it's just like they're receiving all that information and that's so beneficial for them. So just read all the time if you can. Games are super important too, because that's how they learn how to lose or
take turns.
And use their language skills to be like, hey, you know, that wasn't fair. You skip me or something like that. And that's a good way to navigate those social situations a lot of the times. And then the biggest one, I think, is like limiting screen time. Because a lot of the times, screen time, the doctors say like only 2 hours a day max. And it's like, there's truth to that. Like
there's a reason for it.
Yes.
And there's a reason why schools are always saying, read to your kid 15 minutes a day or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, they don't just say these things just because there's like research out there. And I've seen it myself too. There was this student that I had, oh my gosh, he was the best candidate, like speech student ever. But there was one conversation that happened and I asked them like, how many books have you read this year? And one of the kids was like maybe 3 or 4 or like a couple under 10, right? And then one of the students said like 38 or something like that. And it had only been like September.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, how have you read so many books? And he's, well, I only get 2 hours of screen time a day. And I'm like, oh, and that's why you're so smart. Got hundreds on everything, classes, and just like, you could tell I'm like, oh, the difference that it makes because you don't have like that access and all the harmful stuff that there is with like the screens and like that constant dopamine that's hitting them. So you get to a book and it's like, no thanks. This is not that fun. So it's, let me just go to my phone.
If they're like constantly stimulated with screens and videos and YouTube and video games and then parents like, well, they just never want to read. Well, because they have the option to go to their screen.
Yeah, it's like you actually have to work at reading and being able to like decipher that language and like what it looks like and stuff versus just having the information thrown at you. It's like your brain doesn't have to really work at that. Plus, if you're limiting the screen time and maybe you take them to the park or something, they're going to use their language, their speech more often, and they're going to be able to work on the skills that they need to instead of just watching stuff.
So I've had a few cases where like we have our screeners for parents when we're considering a referral at schools, and I'm always curious, especially when it's an AU referral. It's hard to tease out, is this truly AU as an autistic? Is it truly autism, or is it that they haven't had the opportunity to communicate, the opportunity to learn and problem solve and read, and because they've been in front of a screen for 8 to 9 hours a day? Is it really autism, or is it just the lack of opportunity? And or even when we have those referrals for learning disability, is it really a disability, or is it the lack of opportunity to learn?
I've seen that too. I was like thinking the same thing. Man, I think there's a situation here and I hope it's not that, but I think it is. And you're like, I don't think it's an actual autism diagnosis. I think they were just deprived of those moments throughout like their they didn't get those chances to interact with peers or to work on their language skills, right? And that puts them back. And that's why I say like early intervention is so important, because that's where they are going to grow the most and learn those language skills that they need. But sometimes it's like really late in the game and you're like, oh no, were you doing all those things that you were supposed to do when you were little?
As you're talking, I'm thinking about how behavior, communication, and cognitive development are just so intertwined in so many different ways in our therapies, but also the way we can parent at home. They can all just intertwine. And just reading a book, you're hitting on social, you're hitting on communication and cognitive development, and just sitting and reading a book with your kids. And not just reading, but even maybe stopping and asking your kids, what do you think that word meant? Or what do you think is going to happen? So that they can start inferencing, that they can start increasing their verbal comprehension and their expressive language. So being very interactive with that reading.
Right. Make it more dynamic instead
And
of
Claudia
just...
also, I don't think I said this in the beginning, you also have 2 kids.
I do, yes.
Mason and Sophie as besties.
I have a first grader now and a third grader, so...
Yes. So you are speaking not only from a position as a speech pathologist, but also a mother yourself.
Yes, I know. And now that I'm like out of that school setting, I feel like I have a really newfound like appreciation for like all the work it takes.
Yes. I remember when Claudia went into your first year of ISD and you were like, this is so much paperwork. Like, how do you keep up with it?
I don't know how y'all do it. That was, oh my gosh, I never did so much like paperwork and like,
yeah, it's a lot.
It's different. Like in a hospital setting, you have clinical notes that you work on and then you're done for the day. But sometimes like with the school setting, I found myself working at home and I was like, I was done with work, but I went home and I was still working because all day you're seeing kids.
Yeah, and you don't have
time to be writing reports and stuff
for the paperwork.
And I really don't know how y'all do it, but
it's a lot of paperwork.
We love you guys. Like we know, I appreciate you and all the school personnel, like the teachers and therapists, counselors. Like y'all's tests are very extensive and way more than ours. So
yeah, it's a lot of work. I appreciate speech pathologists. I always befriend my speech pathologist whenever I get to meet like whoever I'm working with that year, because it takes teamwork. It's team effort with, us, teachers, admin, in order to really get a good plan in place and services for these students. We have to really work together. So
right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So let's go have some drinks.